Hello learners and viewers, welcome to this session. Today's topic is gender audit. This topic is a part of the course MGSE 002 Gender Audit and Gender Budgeting. I am explaining this gender audit framework for the benefit of the learners enrolled in Masters in Gender and Development Studies. The learners who are doing internship also, they can also use this gender audit framework to do the internship in an organization. This gender audit can be done in any environment, whether it's an organization or any institutions, or you can do the gender audit in a setup where government might have implemented some programs. For that also you can do the gender auditing in a setup where in rural areas, in villages or in community, wherever you would like to do the gender audit, you can very well use this framework and you can do this gender audit framework, and you can come to the conclusion whether implemented programs or organizational policies, whether it could able to mainstream the gender or not. That is the first objective of explaining this gender audit framework. Second is that you all know that the enrolled learners of Masters in Gender and Development Studies, either you need to do the field-based research project or internship. This is also first year also you have to choose either field-based research project or internship. Like first year, second year also you need to submit one field-based research project or internship. Learners, masters learners who decide to do the internship, they can very well use this gender audit framework, and whenever they were part of any organization or institutions, they apply this gender audit framework and they can analyze whether the organizational policies or institutional policies is addressing and mainstreaming gender issues or not. That you come to the conclusion by using this gender audit framework. Gender audit is a social audit, but unlike financial audit, it is a quality audit. When we talk about the financial audits, then we could able to come to the conclusions that whatever the resources, financial resources, particular organization or institutions, whether in government departments, whatever the amount they have received from government or any other institutions, whether they have properly utilized those financial resources or not. There they end. The financial audit stops. But unlike financial audit, gender audit is a quality audit. In this gender audit, one could come to the conclusion that whether internal practices and related support systems for gender mainstreaming are effective and reinforce each other, and whether they are being followed by the organization. You all know that every organization, institutions, they have the gender policies. By using this gender audit framework, certainly we could come to the conclusion that whether organizational policy really facilitating to mainstream gender issues or not, that conclusion one could easily arrive by using gender audit framework. Today's objective of learning, specifically this session, is to know the characteristics of participatory gender audit as well as methodologies of participatory gender audit and benefits. First, let us see what is characteristics of gender audit. Gender audit, when we talk about the gender audit, it establishes a baseline for gender equality and equity. Take, like for example, take in any organization. If you look at any organization, then you must analyze the organizational policy. For example, if you look at the like any organization, you have to see the composition of male, female and other genders. What are the percentage of the male, what are the percentage of female? When you look at their percentage, you come to the conclusion that whether the particular organization encouraging more female to be part of that organization or not. second thing is that when you do the gender audit in any organization, we will come to the conclusion and we identifies what are the existing gaps and challenges for gender mainstreaming. We are talking about the gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming is that any organization, institutions, even at the government departments, they have to mainstream the gender issues for appointing or for creating equal opportunities for gender. It starts from there. Then how much infrastructure they could able to establish based on whether that infrastructure could able to address the needs of the all genders or not, whether it's organizational policies for providing opportunities or infrastructural facilities, any other organizational policies, whether it could able to address the needs of the all genders or not. That conclusion one could arrive by doing the gender audit in an organization or institutions. As well as when we do the gender auditing, we could able to recommend ways of addressing gender gaps, as well as one could able to suggest possible improvements and innovations. When we do the gender auditing in an organization or institutions or any government departments, and wherever we were doing the gender auditing, we could able to document the best practices towards achievement of gender equality. If the particular organization has taken up certain measures to address the gender issues, as well as it tries to bring gender equity and equality, one could able to document those best practices. Those best practices can be emulated in some other organization, or that best practices can be mainstreamed each and every organizations to bring gender equity and equality. As well as when we do the gender auditing, it enhances collective capacity of organization to examine its activities from a gender perspective. As well as when we do the gender auditing, one could able to identify strengths and weaknesses in promoting gender equality issues. When we do the gender auditing, we come to certainly one could able to come to the conclusion that what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses to implement gender policies, how one could able to address those weaknesses to improve gender equity and equality at various levels. That one could able to come to the conclusion by applying gender auditing frameworks in an organization or any institutions or departments, wherever even educational institutions, wherever we want to do the gender auditing, very well we could utilize or we could use this framework to do the gender auditing to bring equity and equality in an organization or institutions. We could also monitor and assesses relative progress in gender mainstreaming. This framework helps build organizational ownership of gender equality initiatives. When we talk about the gender auditing, it sharpens organizational learning on gender through the process of team building. As well as when we do the gender auditing, certainly we need to share the information among organizations, among people in the organization, as well as when we share the information and when we reflect whether the particular organization is facilitating to bring gender equality or not, when we reflect those objectives while doing gender auditing, it could certainly help us to reflect the organization itself will reflect whether the organization is facilitating or organization could able to improve its practices to bring gender equity and equality. Let us see what are the major aims and objectives of gender auditing. When we talk about the gender auditing, it promotes organizational learning on how to implement gender mainstreaming effectively in policies, programs and structures, as well as it could assess the extent to which policies have been institutionalized at the level of organization, work unit and individual. This is the first major aim of the gender auditing. As well as second one is to generate understanding of the extent to which gender mainstreaming has been internalized and acted upon by staff. This, when you look at these two objectives, one could able to come to the conclusion that gender mainstreaming, all of us know that it is the gender mainstreaming is a tool to bring gender perspective in an organization at every level as well as in every policies. For an example, if the organization, if they make any policies, they should reflect, that policies should reflect the needs of the both male and female. According to their needs, the organization has to formulate the policy, it has to be implemented. When you look into some of the organizational policies, one could able to see that they might be having in gender policies, but when it comes to implementation, they may not be able to implement due to the gender insensitivity among gender insensitivity within an organization. Maybe when there must be gender sensitivity in the certain levels, they may not be gender sensitive. That's why they may not take decisions to reflect gender sensitivity within an organization. That's why whether the organization could able to mainstream gender issues effectively in its policies, programs as well as structures, and to assess we could able to assess how far these policies have been institutionalized at the level of organization or work or unit, even individual level also one could able to come to the conclusion. And also how far in an organization one could able to understand the significance of gender issues, that also could be reflected by implementing or when we assess the organizational culture, organizational policies, organizational programs using a gender audit framework, we could easily come to the conclusion whether the organization could able to mainstream gender issues within the organization itself or not. If they are not able to mainstream gender issues, what are the challenges they are facing? If they face the challenges, how far these challenges could be addressed? Those issues could be able to addressed by using the gender audit framework. As well as when we use the gender audit framework, one could able to assess the extent of gender mainstreaming in terms of the development and delivery of gender sensitive products and services. One could able to identify and share information on mechanism, practices and attitudes that have made a positive contribution to mainstreaming gender in an organization. We could also assess the level of resources allocated and spent on gender mainstreaming and gender activities. This is the very important. In the beginning, we were talking about the difference between financial audit and gender audit. When it comes to financial audit, it's merely about the allocation of financial resources, how these financial resources has been spent on particular programs, whether the financial resources has been used to establish any resources, or whether it is used to establish the certain infrastructural facilities. Those things could be easily assessed when we do the financial audit. Unlike financial audit, even gender audit also, we could come to the conclusion, certainly if we want to reflect gender issues or if we want to mainstream gender issues in an organization, certainly we need enough financial resources to implement gender issues. When you must be wondering, you need to know the example when we talk about the resources. For example, if you want to mainstream gender issues by appointing more and more women in an organization, certainly you need financial resources to appoint more women to balance how many percentage of women in that particular organization. You need to assess how many percentage of male in a particular organization. For example, the women's representation is very low in any organization. Certainly you need to increase the women's representation. Then you need to provide more opportunities for the women members to like to participate in an organizational activities, and we have to like establish and we have to provide certain basic facilities for the women to be part of an organization. For that, certainly we need to improve certain infrastructural facilities. For example, restrooms. There should be a convenient separate restroom for male and female. That we need to establish. Sometimes organizational policies need to address the gender issues, like that the women, we need to provide flexi timing for the women to reach, and they may need to leave the office at early. So there should be a transportation facility. So when we need to address gender issues, or when you improve the women's percentage in an organization, accordingly the organizational policies needs to be modified. It should be gender friendly. We need to mainstream gender issues at various levels in an organization, as well as we need to mainstream the gender policies in an organization. When we mainstream gender issues in an organization, the organization must have enough financial resources to mainstream gender in an organization. That we need to address that. When we do the gender audit in an organization, one must assess whether that particular organization has enough financial resources, whether the organization have been allocated enough financial resources to mainstream gender. That one should assess financial resources of an organization also. That could be assessed by using gender audit framework, as well as one could able to examine the extent to which human resources policies and are gender sensitive. That can be assessed, as well as we could able to examine the staff sex balance. Already I have explained the sex balance of the staff in an organization. That needs to be assessed when we do gender audit in an organization. Thus, whether which sex, like whether male's percentage has been more or female percentage is more. If there is an imbalance between male and female in an organization, certainly the organization needs to encourage particular sex to encourage more and more to apply in an organization to improve their percentage in an organization, as well as we need to set up the initial baseline of performance on gender mainstreaming in an organization with the view to introducing the ongoing processes, as well as of benchmarking to measure progress in promoting gender equality. That we need to, when we do gender audit, the learners or whoever taking up this gender auditing in an organization, that particular individual could able to develop certain index. Based on that index, one could able to measure the progress in promoting gender equality in an organization. When we do measure the progress in implementing action plans on gender mainstreaming and recommend revisions as needed. If the particular organization is lacking in promoting gender equity in equality, certainly one could recommend what are the revisions are needed to improve gender equity and equality in an organization, as well as we could able to identify room for improvement and suggest possible strategies to better implement the action plan. Okay, so far we have learned the gender auditing, what is gender auditing, and the importance of gender auditing in implementing in a particular organization or institutions or any government departments, even educational institutions also, one could carry forward gender auditing process. In this way, we must know what is participatory gender audit. Is there any difference between gender audit or participatory? There is no difference between gender audit or participatory gender audit. When we talk about gender audit, certainly we need to carry out in a participatory manner. A participatory gender audit is a methodology for self-assessment of policy implementation by development programs and organizations. When we talk about the participatory gender audit, the main aim of the participatory gender audit is that participants learn about what they are doing concerning gender equality. If we implement gender audit in any organization, it should be in a participatory manner. When we implement participatory gender audit, then the organization, the people in an organization, they come to the know that what they are doing concerning gender equality and women's empowerment in their work, how they do it, how they relate what they are doing and what others are doing, that they could able to easily relate when they are doing participatory gender audit, or if any individual in an organization, if they are part of the participatory gender audit, they could easily relate themselves what they are doing, what others are doing, how they can improve what they are doing and place it in the context in which they work. The assumption is that this learning will lead to proposals for change that can translate the learning into actions. When they actively participate in gender auditing process, in the process itself a learning process, when they actively participate, they could able to learn. Once they learn, certainly they get into action. That will bring changes in any organizational culture that may lead to equity and equality in an organization. The difference between this participatory audit and normal gender evaluation is that the focus of the participatory gender audit is the self-assessment, not external evaluation. That is very important. The organization itself, it will actively do the gender auditing process. Now, it is not about the external evaluation. Someone from the outside, they come and they try to do. It is not about that. When they are doing participatory gender audit, it is the organization itself, they do the participatory gender audit. They could evaluate themselves whether that organizational policy it's leading to gender mainstreaming. If it is not leading to gender mainstreaming, where is the gap? How could they able to address the existing gap? How far they could able to bring gender equity and equality? These questions could be addressed when the organization itself doing the participatory gender auditing process. That's why in the beginning of my lecture itself, I have clearly mentioned that the learners who have enrolled in Masters in Gender and Development Studies, they need to do the 4-credit course. They can choose it, whether field-based research project they do it, or they can do the internship. When they are doing the internship in an organization or any institutions, they will be part of that particular organization. Thus, they could very well use the participatory gender audit framework in an organization, and they could able to learn the entire organizational policies from as an internal member of the organization. They themselves encourage the entire organization to actively participate in the gender auditing process. With that process, the organization, they could able to learn the significance of mainstreaming organizational culture to bring gender equity and equality. The people who are employed in an organization or associated to it as a partner organization or donors are considered as empirical experts that we need to. This is clearly, I have mentioned that in any organization, if the people who are employed in an organization or associated to it as a partner organizations or donor are considered as empirical experts and able and motivated to assess themselves and their organization or their partner organization in order to improve the organization's performance on gender equality and women's empowerment. Let us learn the methodology of participatory gender audit. When we talk about the participatory gender audit, it resets on a combination of 4 methodological pillars that we need to understand that. of current thinking on gender and organizational change. What is that 4 pillar? First pillar is gender and development approach. You know, all of you must be already understand that what is gender and development approach. Second pillar is the qualitative self-assessment. Third pillar is that adult learning cycle. Fourth pillar is that learning organizational approach. First pillar, when we talk about the gender and development, the gender and development methodology recognize that women and men are key actors in social change. Unlike earlier approach, when in women in development and women and development approach, we have addressed women's issues directly to the women after they have realized. The feminist and development experts and researchers, they realize that it is not possible to bring gender equity and equality if we address only on women. It's important to know the existing gender relations or existing power relations between male and female. Then only both male and female, they need to actively participate in bringing social change. So thus gender and development methodology recognize that women and men are key actors in social change. As a learner, you must understand that when we talk about gender, it is not only about women, it's about both men, women and other genders. It assumes that gender relation is in most situations are unequal. That we all know that due to the socialization process and patriarchy, there is an unequal relationship between male and female. These unequal power relations, one should address that. Only if we address the existing unequal power relations, then only we could able to bring changes in the life of the both male and female. Gender inequality originates in patriarchal ideology. The change towards gender equality and women's empowerment requires a change at the level of the institutions there that govern our daily life, structure our social relations, and create and maintain societies where unequal power relations are expressed in existing gender relations as well as through class, caste, religion and ethnicity. Thus, gender and development approach has evolved into sound professional field in which organizational issues involved in changing gender relations. That is very important. Second pillar is that qualitative self-assessment, that we need to assess themselves whether the existing organizational policies is addressing the gender equality or not. Third pillar is that adult learning cycle, and fourth is the learning organizations approach. These are the 4 methodology as far as participatory gender audit is concerned. Hope you could able to understand what is participatory gender audit and its significance of learning participatory gender audit. This framework could be applied when a learner is part of the any organization or institution as a when they do the field-based research project or intern in an organization or any institutions. Thank you so much for listening this lecture.